Hello and welcome to the skating lesson. I'm Dave Leese.
And I'm Jonathan Byer. Hi, Dave. You know, I don't know if this is intentional, but this looks like an homage to rhythmic gymnastics in a nice way.
Oh, well, yes. I mean, probably subconsciously I got it. I don't remember if I got this year, last year, whatever. Yes, it was an early sweater that I got myself. So yes, I haven't bought so many new sweaters lately. So yes, this is
okay. It's lovely.
I don't know. I like it. It makes me happy. It's just,
on that note,
it's a mood, right? Yeah. This and that. We are going to be discussing everything going on in skating. So if you're new here, please subscribe below. Smash that like button. Love us. Jonathan, I bought myself an early birthday present, and like you're one of the only people that would really do it. Like sometimes people treat themselves to vacations. Sometimes people get themselves.
I know what they get themselves. Vases,
right?
Faces. Yeah. Okay.
Well, I was footsing around on the internet and I found something that only you and I maybe would really appreciate, but Dick Button's original autobiography. And I had to get it through like a vintage bookstore and Etsy, but there's just like so many gems in here, and you'll never learn to skate. That's what Dick Button's first skating teacher told the awkward 12-year-old butterball of a boy from Englewood, New Jersey.
Meanwhile, seeing 12-year-olds do like quad lutzes this week.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
The fact that he calls himself a butterball, but the thrill of flashing blades on glittering ice ran headlong through Dick Button's veins, and 6 short years later, grown to hard-muscled young manhood. There are so many tongue twisters in here. We may need to do a dramatic reading, but I think it might be the most difficult.
Requires practice. Yeah, exactly.
Yes. Peter Piper picked a peck of
butterball turkeys.
Butterball turkey, right? Oh my God, there are so many things.
I didn't realize he had written. We obviously did all that stuff about Push Dick's Button, which was so funny and such an enjoyable read. But I did not realize that he had written this one before that.
I mean, he really had.
Okay.
He really had.
Okay.
And right, he also teaches us how to do all of the compulsory figures. It's part autobiography, part instructional book with photos of Dick teaching us how to do the compulsory figures.
Great. There's a how-to component.
A real collector's item, if you will. Just like this would be a great laugh. So.
A sign that you are getting older, that we love these sorts of purchases. That I remember during COVID when I got like the old ice dance manual from like the 80s. I thought it was the most exciting thing that came that day. And I was like, who are you becoming, Jonathan? This is tough. Yeah.
Well, I have a friend that will just send me books randomly that he had in his house. And sometimes I'm like, well, if you're cleaning out your house, that doesn't mean that
right.
I need all of your stuff.
Yeah, understood.
Thank you. But I mean, I have the book about the Jelenics. I mean, you do.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
A reference material, if you will. So
exactly.
Oh, what a messy sport. Okay, so this week was the Russian Junior Figure Skating Championships, and people have a lot of feelings on Russia. From a historical
what's going on?
I don't know, right? I found the whole event interesting because Russian skating has also hit a bit of a quagmire and difficult situation where they don't really necessarily have motivation to keep going, and yet their athletes are still developing. But we're seeing that for the first time in years, eteri did not have a female figure skater on the podium. Of course, she did have Arseny Fedotov win the men's event, but this is kind of the end of an era. Plushenko had the silver medalist. He also had a 4th place finisher, and yet was criticizing the judges. And Russia has a very serious code of ethics now in figure skating, which involves things like don't criticize the judges publicly. And it was very much against leaks that were coming out for a while, which are their own people talking always. But it was very much meant to control the coaches rather than really promote ethical behavior.
I mean, so just to sort of dive into that, like this was mainly about, now I'm going to get the emphasis wrong because I know that's where we need to focus it. Sofia Titova or Titova?
Veronika Zhilina is really the one that he seems
the one that he got spicy about. Because when he was talking about Sophia's issue in the short program, her offering the triple axel combination, that's what I was really interested to go back and watch. And for her to have done it with the step in between, for suddenly her entire element to have only received 4 points for that combination did seem a little extra harsh in a nationals field where we saw a lot of errors still get some high GOE.
I have to tell you, I was confused by this championship, and ultimately winning junior doesn't mean much, except for if you're a Russian skater and may not last until senior. Ultimately, I was really kind of struck by a couple of things here. None of the juniors, especially Plushenko's, but actually Darya Usacheva from Eteri as well, it seemed like any piece of music could be playing. There was absolutely no presentation, musicality of any sorts. And I was thinking, like, what have we wrought on the sport? I mean, it was a new low in musicality. Veronika Zhilina has skated through many classical pieces of music over the last few years. They had her skate to Love Story last year for no reason. And this year, she does a short program that starts with The Dying Swan and ends with Swan Lake. And I don't know what could possibly be the story of this program. And this is a culture that gets elitist about their ballet. They will be condescending, that we don't understand it. And yet this is someone who seems to have zero understanding of what any of these works are about. It was a strange choice.
Got me thinking, obviously, you know, we were talking a couple of weeks ago, I went back and did this like deep dive where I was watching all the full world championships from the early 2000s, where it was really this Yagudin Plushenko kind of rivalry. And it was clear someone like Yagudin was inherently more artistic, skated more to the music, had more of a point of view in the program. However, what you couldn't take away from Evgeni was that he was a performer. So even though his performances may not have been so musically nuanced, he still gave you a show. Even if that show was one of swagger and confidence, he still performed for the crowd, whether that was your taste or not, he was giving you that. And with all these difficult elements that a lot of these juniors were doing, I understand that with the complications and limitations put on through IJS, it makes it very difficult. However, there can still be some showmanship and actual performance going on, a little razzle dazzle for the crowd at these things they're doing. And somehow he has not been able to teach that to his students.
Well, neither did Eteri, really. Darya Usacheva was also an interesting choice because she is performing to Unchained Melody from Ghost, and then it's a part where an entire choir seems to be singing, or many artists, and you start to see how people don't really understand music and skating and what works and what doesn't. It's just a blaring piece of music completely overpowering her. And you can tell that no time has been spent crafting this program. It really feels like Eteri and her team seem overwhelmingly burned out from the Olympics in the last years, which is understandable. But I think we're seeing that they have fewer athletes at the lower levels who are prepared and being groomed for future success. I mean, Eteri spent a lot of time in the US over the last year guiding Diana's career. And I think you can kind of, in her coaching situation, I think you can start to see that burnout and the lack of attention, especially in some of these younger skaters. Now, that's not to say that this is going to last forever. I think if they want to succeed, they will be scouting and trying to take top skaters from other coaches, which they've done in the past. But you can just see that there's a real delta in terms of the talent and Eteri's real, string of dominance. It doesn't seem as strong. Obviously, they have a skater, Elisa Devglazina, who had a knee injury and wasn't here, and she could perform quad lutzes and quad toes. I think she's done a quad flip in training as well. But one skater doesn't make the entire army for eteri. She used to have 3 for every one skater for other people. So it's interesting to see that string of success kind of fall. I think it shows that maybe her talents do exist in terms of talent identification and in terms of managerial function when her underlings are coaching, but it's not the same. You can really say.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's good or bad, right? I mean, it is what it is. She's opening up another rink and she's figuring out Diana and what they're going to do with citizenship and all of that, but she's not had the same presence this year.
Yeah. And even, I mean, again, they almost need like an acting coach or something like this, because it seems clear. You are correct. I have never found a lot of the camp to be very musically nuanced, because I think that has to come from the choreographer, and based on the movements that were assigned to the music, there seemed to be little relation. The movements were there only to make sure levels were achieved and marks could be given in certain categories. But again, I'm just missing any sort of connection to the audience, as opposed to Arseny Fedotov. I think what his huge draw is that there is a real element of performance there.
And I'm glad that he hasn't lost it. We saw this when he was on Ice Age as a kid, which is now several years ago. We've actually watched him grow up on YouTube, and his brother. I'm glad that he hasn't lost it, because a lot of male skaters go through those periods when they're going through adolescence where they then become really self-conscious. I think we saw it with Nathan Chen, who went from doing Peter and the Wolf and the Godfather program to then have those awkward years, especially when he was around the Junior Grand Prix. And then they brought it back, right?
Because how old is Arseny now?
Probably like 13, 14 years old, around there, yeah.
He gave us, especially in the short program, the Caravan short program, he gave you a couple real honest moments of shimmying. He did it to open, and then mid crossovers into like one of the jumping elements, gave it to you as well. And it's easy for a skater to apologize for that, or to just like do it because they were told. But he sort of embodies that moment, owns it, knows what it is, gives us what we want, and becomes the real performer in the bus.
He also has grown, and it's good to see that so far he doesn't seem to be injured. Many of Terry's boys over the years have had the worst injuries of anyone, to where they really disappear. I mean, Samsonov, Arjen Pekeyev.
Both of them, actually.
The boy who wore the Star of David the one year. I mean, they have really had a string of boys that have just disappeared, and you never see them in the ice show or do anything after that. So I've always liked him. He has a real charisma, and he has an inherent skating ability. That I like the West Side Story program too, not as much. I liked his short program last year very much. His Singing in the Rain was a great program. So he's really, and he has better skating skills than some. Maybe because he's a boy, there isn't as much pressure on him. I don't know, exactly what is the situation there. I wonder, because there were other boys that he trained with and they've left and gone to other coaches. A couple of them have had, like, I think Mark Lucan has had at least 2 coaching changes since he was with Eteri, and there was a couple other boys that were really quite talented. But Arseny has stuck it out, and it's
with posture and presence and personality, and the jumps were solid, the edges were nice. It was sort of the exception to this sort of shut off sort of single skating we were seeing in the rest of the event. I was actually curious to ask you about the timing of this event. So, for instance, in the United States, our junior and senior nationals are coupled together at the same time. In Japan, we have always known they do the junior before.
They always do this one after.
Yeah, which is interesting, because oftentimes they have often competed in the senior.
Like Lipnitskaya did both. Yeah.
Right. So is this just because in the past they were looking to sort of solidify the junior world championship team closer to the event? It always confused me, the timing of this.
Don't ask me to explain Mother Russia, but they do seem to do this event closer to the junior world championships. Look, these events are very important for certain countries. So, in skating, a lot of the history of age falsification has to do with winning junior worlds, not senior.
Right.
And oftentimes it's done in pairs and dance because both partners aren't eligible. So you know how there's the US pair that has the
one is too young and one is too old. Yeah.
So this has happened in China for years. This has happened in the Soviet Union, right, where they would change their ages. So certain cultures, the junior worlds take on a different level of importance than, obviously it's a huge mark as a skater and the biggest event that you do at that time, and certainly great experience, but it doesn't mean the same thing as the senior world title, but in certain countries it's more important, and perhaps it is why this event is closer, and they've done this for years and years, that it's been a separate event. But
yeah,
I was curious, and I don't know, because we haven't read as much about Arseny Fedotov as we do. They've obviously covered all of Eteri's ladies and junior ladies much more extensively, although less extensively as she's gone more underground over the last couple of years. She stopped giving as many interviews. Danny G even doesn't give as many interviews. And they've had more of a mystique, but they've also had a publicity machine, but this year, not as much. We don't know as much about Akacheva or Petrosian, which doesn't actually bode well for skating in Russia, which is also suffering a bit, not as much as it's suffering elsewhere, but in Russia, because of the war and because of the lack of international competitions, those two things have really hurt.
They always boast about their full stands, and here it was a rather empty event. Now, of course, comparatively, it was outrageously empty in the United States for junior nationals and senior nationals, quite honestly. But it was a different sight to see, with so many empty seats in this event.
For years and years and years, the Russian media and figure skating machine has really created more and more stars, and it's been like a conveyor belt. But this year, there's been a little bit of a pause, right? We don't know as much about Akacheva. We don't know as much about Petrosian. Some of that is Eteri's focus being elsewhere. Some of that are resources that would go to figure skating covering the war. I think less interest without these athletes competing internationally. I think if Petrosian and Sofia were competing at junior and senior Grand Prix, that there would be more interest in them. One thing about Arseny is that his brother isn't listed as Team Tutberidze anymore, and he does still skate. So I don't know why the brother left. He's not as talented, but maybe the Nancy Heiss to Carol, right, where the younger one is slightly less talented, but I don't, and oftentimes the younger one is more talented. Michelle was more talented than Karen. Mariah Bell was more successful than Morgan, but I don't know, but he is still skating and has some triples, but I would be curious if he left for good, if he will come back. They skate remarkably similar. One thing I wanted to say about Arseny is, he's still my hair icon. I did show my hairdresser his haircut once and was like, I want that. He's now doing something different, so I have to, grow my hair different.
Okay.
The boy has fantastic hair. I could only wish. One thing I thought was he has one of the greatest donut spins we've ever seen. Yeah. Certainly from a man, but really of any skater, that catch-foot camel position is really outstanding. So
just the overall carriage on the ice and the presence, just the minute he takes those, opening positions, it just is attention grabbing. He was the only real single skater here that really captured my attention start to finish in both programs.
Yeah.
And given the camp it came from, some of their better programs that they have created.
Do you think that they just lean into it because they know he's been such a star and he hasn't had many of the jumps, so they just lead with the ability?
Yeah, it was back to when Elena was saying about Mishin, that she was like, sometimes Mishin isn't going to try to pull the rug up from someone, like with a Plushenko. If he didn't really have that artistic sensibility but knew how to showboat, he was going to go with that. So if you have an Arseny with you who just inherently has these beautiful moves, just go with it.
Well, I'm impressed that even Danny G hasn't messed this up yet. Okay.
Yeah, has kind of gotten out of the way of it. And interestingly enough, as a result, and I mean this in a positive way, these programs seemed more open than some other programs. It wasn't bogged down by cluttering transitions and moves and inner steps than some of the others.
He looks like he enjoys what he's doing, which you don't often see at the juniors. I mean, there's a lot of pressure that these skaters start to feel at this level, and you can still see a skater enjoying themselves, which is refreshing. You could tell that every single junior lady that we watched was under a tremendous amount of pressure.
Yeah.
So
interesting, because in this season, there is no junior worlds for them. This is kind of where that ends. Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know if we'll see them do exhibitions at their alternative to Worlds, the Russian Cup final, which is coming up in just a couple of weeks. They're also having some show skating competition. They're acting like they invented a professional competition, which is coming up. It's nothing as like this has ever been done before, they keep saying. So I'm curious what will happen here. Who knows? But I did think that some of the repetitive names were also kind of fun, because we've had this situation in the US. There's an Anna Sherbakova who won ice dance, and then the winner of the junior women's event was Maria Gorgieva, which, if you have read Katya Gorgieva's book, is the name of her younger sister. So maybe her younger sister was a lot younger than we knew, but
so much younger, yeah.
So much younger, Maria. But Anna Sherbakova, but they'll even say in articles, Anna Sherbakova, the ice dancer. But I have to tell you, you inherently do watch a skater more when they have these names. It just happens. Do you remember in the US when Michelle was in her heyday, and there was Karen, right? There was a skater who competed against Jenny that was named Elizabeth Kwon, Kwon. But even because of her name, and because she was coached by Audrey Wisiger, who is one of the big sources for Christine Brennan to explain skating to her and teach her, because they lived close in the DC metro area. She was covered in some of the books that Christine wrote. She wound up winning, I think, novice nationals when Jenny competed, and people remember Elizabeth Kwon, and you have to say that some of that is because of her name and the way that proximity to media worked at the time. So it just kind of made me laugh that, yes, we inherently do watch.
If you remember, of course, it just stands out. It breaks through the noise. Yeah.
Good and bad, right? Maybe one day she will change her name to Pasha, but for right now, we are paying more attention to Anna Sherbakova because she has the same name as the champion. Yeah.
Even with first names, I remember Phil Hirsch one year when Tanya Kwiatkowski won the short program at Nationals. Like, the article was like Tanya Tonia, not Tanya Tonya. And then it was this like whole blurb about Tanya Kwiatkowski.
Poor Tanya Kwiatkowski, really one of the bridesmaids of all time. I did the thing about the commercials, and I mean, the USFS, how are they going to send Tanya Kwiatkowski to the Olympics when they had the 3 stars that could have swept 97 worlds had Carlo not asked, on the Campbell soup cans. I mean, people argue that things are predetermined now. Well, if you imagine if you were Tanya Kwiatkowski and the soup cans came out, you would be like...
At least she had that Worlds moment in 98. That made me feel so much better for her.
And 96.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
But Jonathan, if this and that were around before the 98 Olympics, we'd have been telling Tanya Kwiatkowski to turn professional then. Okay, we would have been saying...
She could have really made some more money at it. Yeah.
Luckily, they made money from the USFS and amateur skating, and she did tour, but the writing was on the wall. But I did post some old pictures on Facebook, which people didn't jump at, but it just depends which people see it first with the algorithm. But there's an old picture of Carol coaching Tanya and Jenny Mino together.
Right, I did see that, yeah.
So I've been posting some old clips, so for people to enjoy, because I realized that certain stuff isn't publicly accessible. So I figured, well, why not put it out there? Right. So,
and you said you posted Rise.
Yeah, because
which
again,
I remember seeing in the theater back in the day, and I convinced.
It's never been available since. It's never been made.
Yeah, and the film itself was fine, but I remember seeing it live in the theater. Then it also came with like, we were like fed in live to that banquet afterwards, where it seemed like drinks were flowing for certain panelists and certain uncomfortable questions were asked in certain moments. Did you post that part as well, or is it just
that part was never not included on the DVD for posterity, unfortunately.
Funny that. I wonder why that was. I think it was like Dorothy Hamill, who seemed to be having a good time that night, turned to Michelle Kwan and she was like, "Oh yeah, parents are the worst. Wasn't your dad like the craziest or something?" And I remember being like, "Oh my gosh, someone needs to stop this feed." Yeah.
It was one of those early movie events where you could go to AMC and see it on a I've been to some of those for the Golden Girls, where you could watch 4 episodes randomly, and
and then they have that like live talkback that's being like fed into the movie theater afterwards. Yeah,
they always do the operas there. You could go see for one night.
I've been in those, the Met Live, the HD broadcasts.
Yeah. That was a real US figure skating event. That was like an era, that was around the time of Johnny's show on TV. There was Ice Network. It felt a little more coherently together. Some kind of more sense. Yeah, but at that time that was, but remember, it came with the 61 Nationals on DVD, and they had the smoking commercial where the skaters light up on the ice. So yeah. Mm-hmm. I'll put that in volume 2 of the best commercials.
To me, that was always the funny bit about hearing Carol Heiss speak, because she had such this like beautiful Disney princess quality to her aesthetic. And then to hear her talk, I was like, oh, she might be doing a couple cigarette commercials herself.
She didn't get along with the other actress that was in that Snow White and the Three Stooges, the one that played the evil stepmother. She claims that Carol tried to get her fired numerous times from the film. I was going down a rabbit hole this week, and I was like, yes, that is
amazing. Was the evil queen also a skater?
No.
It would have been more funny if it had been. Okay. Okay.
Also, there's a clip that emerged on Twitter of Lambiel coaching Deniss, and I guess Deniss fell on his first triple axel, and Stephane was chastising him for being unfocused because he didn't add the combination to the second axel, which is, maybe Amber Glenn should watch this clip, but I think you can tell Lambiel is changing a little bit, right? He's no longer just the young, energetic coach. Now he is the elder statesman of sorts, who is probably a little more tired and trying to make these results happen, which
especially for someone who Deniss has been with kind of since day one of really being a relevant senior competitor.
Yeah, I've been curious how that relationship changes, because if you've been the loyal student forever, how does that change when you bring in Shoma Uno, who seems like he requires a lot of attention to get him to be at the top, but he also gives Stephane the bigger wins? It has got to have changed the dynamic between Stephane and Deniss. That has got to have really been.
And I mean, what? They've been coaching together like at least 10 years or something, right?
Yeah, I mean, look, and Deniss has had a great career. I mean, he's hard on ice, and there are a lot of things that he would not be able to do if he weren't represented by Stephane's manager. And
but I mean, I think even as young as Stephane is, and as obviously young as Deniss is, they both must have grown so much as people in those 10 years or so. Again, I'm making up that number.
Well, Stephane was being kind of,
yeah.
Look, is it the worst thing that's ever been said? No. They're also getting to the part of the season where you want to get every point that's on the table, right? Because they're going into the World Championships. And Stephane is clearly frustrated with him. But I was also really proud of Deniss for voicing himself, because Stephane was saying, you were unfocused in this, and Deniss was saying, I was absolutely focused. How often do I fall on the first triple axel in practice? And I mean, obviously you can say, okay, if you fall on that axle, you've got to do the combo on the second one. It's just like how Stephane was saying it, but then Deniss was standing up for himself. So it was.
And sometimes I feel right after the performance, it's so performative what that coach says anyway. it's sort of like a disclaimer, like this wasn't my fault that this happened or something like that. And I just think after a skate, and the minute you get off the ice, is that skater really open mentally and emotionally to receive that criticism, or are they still processing what just happened? It's seconds after that just finished.
Yeah.
That's a conversation maybe for the bus ride back to the hotel or something.
But I'm sure is it similar in the opera? As soon as it finishes, right, you have that up and down of the
days. Yeah, you're just sort of processing what just happened. So if a conductor were to come up with you and be like, okay, now next performance in this part, and I'm like, whoa, I can't right now. I have to like get through like processing what just happened, and let's talk about this when I'm in the headspace to talk about it. Yeah.
And this was such a small event that was. Sometimes these great events, the small ones, are the ones where the kiss and cry doesn't have the commentator speaking over it, so you could just hear it on the open mic. Remember the time, I mean, some of the great kiss and cry moments of all time have happened.
4 continents in particular, I remember some really excellent hot mic kiss and cry moments. Yeah.
Remember when Sara Hurtado and Adria Diaz, I mean, there wasn't a microphone in the kiss and cry for this, but you could just see it.
We had eyes and saw a whole bunch of body language. Yeah.
Yes. And then do you remember when Vanessa like shook her finger at Morgan when he was being himself, and she walked out of the kiss and cry ahead of him? A great moment at some of these small competitions.
Yeah.
What are your favorite kiss and cry moments? What have been those? Yes, where you see.
I mean, again, I think about Alexa and Chris one time at 4 Continents, and I think Delilah was trying to like pump them up and be like, that was a good one. And she was like, no, it really wasn't. There was like nothing redeeming.
I forget what she said. I think it was 2014.
It was somewhere in there. It was good. It was good, whatever it was.
And it was our girl Alexa really just delivering. Yes. Deanna Stellato in 2019.
That's right. That's right. They're good moments.
I was talking to her and I said, if anyone is going to do the Pamchenko, it's Deanna. She's just going to go for it at the World Championships. Yeah. Oh my God. The best is, Deanna and Megan are like 2 very intense people about the same age, and they seem to respect each other, but you could tell Megan's comments about the side-by-side doubles have just like irked Deanna a little bit. And right, which like we love, because when Megan's on the show, all the pair girls, like they watch that. And sometimes we'll receive text messages about it, right? What she says. And one of the reporters, they translated on FS Gossips, the whatever publication published it, but they asked Deanna about Megan's comments about the lower difficulty. And Deanna's like, well, we've been getting higher components on our lift, higher PCS and higher GUE in our lift, and it was a strategic decision, and I've been sick, and da-da-da. Of course, Megan is entitled to her opinion, and I respect that, right? But you could just tell, like,
yeah, but let me tell you why it's wrong. Yeah.
Let me tell you, okay? And
I mean, it's always.
Listen, we love them both. We love them both. Which one is more intense? I'm not sure. Is it the girl that did 2 throw quads or the girl that came back at 110? I'm not sure which one is more intense, but frankly, I'm into it. Yeah.
But again, it's interesting because the discipline can draw that personality type.
It sure can.
It sure can. It sure can.
It was funny is that I was saying to Deanna once, I was like, if I didn't do singles, I think I'd be an ice dancer. And she's like, you're a pair girl. She's like that person.
In Canada for same-sex pairs or whatever they just said they were going to do. Yeah. Okay.
It's funny is that I did spirals in a previous relationship when I did a mistake, right?
Andy Bortzel? Yeah.
And, just learning, and you can even see on the clip, like they're being nasty as we're doing it. And I was just like, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me right now? Right? Yeah.
Skating reveals all.
It does.
Mirror to the soul. Or it can be. Yeah.
Can be. I was like, wow. All right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Understood. But, see, you should have waited and done one with John Curry behind you.
Should have. Yeah. He seemed so nice, right?
Yeah, he seemed pretty easygoing. If you made a mistake, it would be fine. If you forgot to point your toe, he totally doesn't care.
Oh my God. So I was watching, You know, when I took lessons from JoJo, when everyone always wanted to talk about her football player husband, right? And like allegedly he was a little jealous when she did that tango with John Curry. I mean, talk about insecurity there. Yes.
Talk about misinformed. Yeah.
Billy Bradshaw, which means nothing to us, but apparently he was quite famous, right? And played
yeah, to catch a ball or something. Okay.
Right. But yeah, everyone's always like, oh.
Isn't that interesting?
It's like, yeah, I don't, you know, I don't think we really just go into her ex-husband. You know, that's not really what we do. But I was at my parents' last weekend for the Super Bowl, and he was on the pre-show, and I was like, oh.
Oh, interesting. Okay, that's like when people refer to Maria Callas as like someone who married Aristotle Onassis. I was like,
yes.
Who cares about him? Okay, okay. JoJo, 4th place at the Olympics. Pairs, come on, we love JoJo.
One of the saints of all figure skating, right?
Commentator in the cutting edge, brilliance, brilliance.
She's wonderful. She's the star of the Eiscapades and in those Sanka commercials, really just a gem. Yes.
But bringing it back to pairs, I mean, some of the Russian junior pairs we saw here, very excellent. And what I was impressed by, one of the things that was sort of like getting me a little depleted in the pairs this season was the sameness of everything. And again, I understand this is a limitation of everybody trying to get a damn level because they know these positions and these combinations of positions will get you certain points. And you always see that girl awkwardly leaning against her leg in this weird side split in an unesthetic lift position that seems to whatever, get a level. But some of the juniors here were offering us different lift positions that were getting those levels. And it was really refreshing to see. Not
that one arm, like lift to your sacrum. I mean,
that one was amazing. Now, because you were mentioning to me via text, it was the team that ended up second in the eteri count. And they had some really, really great lift positions, but also the team that won were doing some.
Also, and they're all doing the Sal Euler Sal combinations, which just seems rudimentary. I'm a little worried about our girl Alyona Kosternaya. I mean, not only is she already dating her pair partner but they're on vacation and doing lifts, right?
Next step, the top of the podium.
I'm just worried about her health. I mean, she's going to have to do a Sal Euler Sal. Luckily, she did do a flip Euler Sal once upon a time, but doing it in time with another person, who knows how long she jumped. And, you know, she breaks her hand and fingers every other day. I'm just worried about our girl. Think about, I mean, listen, if there were documentary film makers or for a reality show, please follow Kosternaya and Trusova on whatever is going on in their lives. Hit show in Russia. Yeah. Guaranteed.
Yeah.
Follow Kosternaya on this pair journey. Okay.
It would be in
all the partners. Okay. I mean, listen, her boyfriend seems cute, right? I mean, this is going to turn out so well. New relationship, new partnership.
Discipline. Yeah. What could go wrong?
What could go? You know, I'd like to bring her back to Eteri's camp. Why not? You know,
oh my God.
Carry on my wayward son. Like, bring her back, okay? Like, come on. This
New York program again.
This Pavel Slusharenko seems like he's a good pair coach, and also he's also working with Elizaveta Osokina, who was originally with Ganova. Remember
now
the girl?
That is someone who has jumped disciplines and is really great. I really enjoyed her as a single skater. I know she wasn't really getting the success she wanted in it, but I enjoyed her thoroughly. I had not realized she had made that change. I thought she did a lovely job here.
Listen, she's put in the work. She's been in like figure skating purgatory for years, getting better at the pairs, learning these. I know it's not going to happen overnight for Kosternaya, but we can hope and we can root for her.
Interesting to watch. Yeah. Yeah.
Also, did you see Trusova is going to be Ariel, like in The Little Mermaid? Did you see those pictures this week? It was...
Give a girl red hair, and I guess it's
I like how she hasn't done anything in figure skating in a year. And like, I'll even talk to these reporters who are so, like, I really respect them outside of this, but Russia and mental health is really, you know, they don't really seem to believe in it. Although so many of the doping practices that we see in Russia involve PTSD treatment, right? The xenon gas and the electromagnetic brainwave treatments that they do in Novogorsk all related to trauma and what the body can withstand mentally and psychologically. But, they don't seem to believe in mental health. Why Kolyada doesn't perform well, a huge mystery, to everyone, right? Alcoholism, they're so on top of, the treatment for that. And with Trusova, they're like, oh, she just has a boyfriend, seemingly forgetting that we saw her have a breakdown.
Yeah.
In front of the entire world. She's never been the same since. But, nothing here.
Didn't she make an Olympic anniversary post where she was like, where this was the day I achieved my dream of landing this many quads, and my dream still didn't work out. Hope yours does.
Yeah.
It's like,
he seems to be doing really well.
Yeah.
And also, I don't think all those quads are rotated, but I do understand that she was being fed this for.
And it's not to say she's being overreactive. I mean, this was a huge thing. It makes sense that she would just need some help in processing all of this.
Listen, I think each of those girls were manipulated to achieve that final result. Each one was told what they needed to, because each one, if they lost motivation, would not have swept, right? You needed all three going for the win,
right?
In order to get that. They wanted a sweep, and to get it in whatever way, I'm sure they told each skater what they needed to. It seemed like they ignored Shcherbakova to get her to work harder.
Right.
And I mean, there were crazy reports coming out. I mean, who knows what was true or what wasn't. But remember, we started hearing reports about, there were rumors about Shcherbakova hiding someone's skates when they came back to the rink, or skating into someone on purpose, which doesn't seem.
And this is the single skater, not the ice dancer.
Right. But which doesn't seem in her character, and who knows what's true or not. Then you think like, okay, well, how are they being treated, right? If you're being traumatized and psychologically abused, there's something called reactive abuse that does seem to take place. And
trying to protect yourself whatever way you can. I mean, it's a tough situation.
Yeah, I am sure this was not the healthiest of the training environments leading up to the Olympics. So,
right.
And I'm working on a year retrospective piece. And
what a year it was.
But there are so many great, and it's more of like, instead of a recap, more of a think piece about some of these nuances. But if you notice, they haven't actually seemed to question how Vasilevjs got the drug into her system. And they haven't seemed to ask any questions about that, only to focus on that she's 15 and she couldn't have taken this by herself. But even the gaslighting that this organization has really...
Well, and then even to that point, as we talk about where Russia's place is in international sport at the moment, and again, some people don't like that we talk about that skating is still happening in Russia, but it is still happening in Russia. I was intrigued by also the advertisers on the barriers here. They still had John Wilson, MK Blades blasted all over that thing and a day of skates. And I thought, are these people still contributing to these events? Or
I would be curious, did they have long-term deals that they chose not to end?
Okay.
And for them, skating in Russia is a business opportunity. I'm not defending or excusing.
I mean, there was one thing to see Rostelecom and those sorts of names up there, but then to see so many.
And remember, that's why, it's part of the reason why John Wilson Blades is even be able to have their event. I mean, one event went to Finland, one event went to the UK. I think they may have actually replaced a couple of China, but I forget which happened first, and people will write in the comments. But if not for these political situations, it all looks very different. Yeah, that is a strange thing, but I think it was a big deal for John Wilson and MK to get into the Russian market for blades, and they have continued. I mean, I don't know if you read the article. There was an article that came out about memos of the Bush administration when they transitioned to Obama, but they were talking about Russia, and they were talking about if Russia goes into Ukraine, this will cause a wedge between the US and the rest of Europe in terms of how they eventually deal with this because Russia will use its energy, other countries having energy on it to really sever that relationship. And it's true, like how it's all happened in Germany has been so wishy-washy in the middle. It's really an interesting read.
Complicated. Yeah.
But yeah, just I don't know what will happen. It does seem like the Olympics, it's not getting better, right? Each week we seem to see that Thomas Bach seems to be moving towards allowing Russians to compete as neutrals, and the rest of the world is not thrilled with that.
Yeah, and then admonished Ukraine when it said it would not compete. It would not send people if.
Yeah, it really seems like a lose-lose situation if they allow, if they do need Russia because other countries are pressuring them and then they don't, they're potentially in trouble and perhaps losing or afraid of losing big sources of revenue from those broadcasters. And if they do and people turn it off, it's a huge risk. I don't know realistically. I mean, I know we live in a euphoric world, but we would like to say yes, don't allow them to compete. But let's say NBC doesn't renew for the same amount of money,
right,
to have the Olympics. And
I mean, for several reasons, but Beijing and Japan were huge losses for them, was it not?
Definitely their ratings were down. I don't know with streaming how it all works, and NBC doesn't provide us this detailed breakdown for how this works, but with Peacock and online, certainly the TV ratings were extremely down, but how many people are watching live on Peacock? I don't know.
They were doing that same thing. Remember, and I always forget her name. She's hilarious. She's a Black comedian, Leslie
Jones.
Jones. It is Leslie Jones. Okay, I was thinking that in my head. I was like, is that right? When she was doing her very comical recaps of things, and she did one of the skating events, and it was so exciting, and everyone started flocking to it. And I think it was pairs, and she was just like having these huge reactions to what they were doing, and NBC shut her down in a second. And I thought, you are doing such damage. Whatever dollar you think you're protecting, you have just gotten rid of what was actually getting us all to watch it at the time.
They are very territorial, and that's one of their.
I think to a fault, to the point where they're being penny smart, dollar stupid in certain moments like that.
Some of the Japanese coverage is like that as well when the coverage gets on YouTube.
Okay.
But I don't know if that's a paid model. I mean, I don't understand TV broadcasting in Japan, but those clips get taken down so quickly. But again.
Well, people were talking when we covered Kaori and things like that, doing that event, we had watched it beforehand, and by the time the show aired, they had already taken them all down.
Yeah, that happens for the Japan Open almost every year. That happens. So yeah. Wow. I'll be curious. We have the Challenge Cup this coming week. We're going to see Torgashev go for the minimums, and this is where they're going to test out having two panels, one for technical elements and one for.
They are. I didn't know that.
So this week,
and they're testing that.
Yeah, and Kaori, Mai, and Mana are competing again before Worlds. So, listen, it's another chance for Kaori to really nail those triples. Maybe she'll be higher than 50-50 now.
And also, so they won't be doing. They'll still have one panel for both at Worlds.
Yes, but this is where they're testing this out, and I'm worried for Kaori's edge jumps. Her loop and sow have been iffy lately. Yeah.
I'm very intrigued. I mean, it must bring the expense of the competition up so much to have more people, or do they?
Yeah, you will have to have more people and lodging.
That makes it quite expensive, eh?
Yeah, we'll see.
But I'm intrigued what that does, if anything, if that starts to change some of the scores for some people.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not optimistic, but
okay.
I'm out for experimentation, and why not? Let it happen.
Why not? We'll watch it. Yeah, see what happens.
Well, the edge should look sexy, everyone. I know.